This paper reports on investigation to the ways categories are used in a flirting sequence, which is taken from a collection of video recordings of naturally occurring everyday conversations in Bali, Indonesia. The paper was originally presented on 2018 AIEMCA conference in Macau, held between 27th to 29th November 2018 at the University of Macau. In accordance with its panel on membership categorization analysis, this presentation is about categories and it takes MCA, an approach initiated by Harvey Sachs in studying categories. According to Sachs, the initiator of this method, category is inference-rich. Within the category, a great deal of the knowledge that members of a society have about the society is stored. For Sachs, the aim of MCA is to provide for how it is that something that's done is recognized for what it is. The cornerstone of interaction is the ability of the participants to understand each other and then respond or react in a certain way. Much of this process comes from the process of making inference, and the lenses through how these inferences happen is category. One may see a certain behavior as fitting or not fitting as a result of the perceived category of the person doing it. In terms of analysis, MCA then provides the tool to dissect the participants' inferential process through category. According to Sachs, categories also belong to membership categorization devices, or MCD in short. The mentions of a certain category may make another category or other categories belong to the same device relevant, along with the normative relationships among those categories. For example, wife and husband who belong to the MCD of married couple. The mere mention of wife through inferences may also make husband relevant. What activity a wife and a husband normatively do, or their category-bound activities, and what the characteristic of a wife and a husband in the context of married couple, or their category-type predicate, also made relevant as a result of the mention of wife. Similar mechanism also at work for other categories. The data is in Indonesian language, specifically the variety of Indonesian spoken in the island of Bali. The findings of Flirtatious sequence can be said to be natural and even serendipitous. The participants were not in any way asked, directed, or even hinted to perform flirting interaction. What they understood that they were recorded for a study about conversational Indonesian. The specific recording used for our data is around 50 minutes long, consisting of 9 flirtatious sequences. The participants were pseudonymized as Eva and John. Eva and John are college friends. They have known each other for around 10 years. Eva is married with a son. Because of work engagement, Eva's husband spends most of his time overseas, and he only returns home every 6 to 10 months for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. When this data was collected, John was single. Flirtatious sequence. What is it? For the purpose of today's presentation and analysis, we focus on the definition of flirtatious sequence as sequence of affiliative actions where sexual or romantic attraction is relevant, and then borrowing Hopper 2013 term, serial ambiguity is maintained. Serial ambiguity occurs when sexual subtexts are possibly being exchanged by the participants one after the other in the absence of clarification. Now let's talk about the findings, how categories are used in flirtatious sequence. Our observation regarding the use of categories in the flirtatious sequences in our data can be summarized into 3 groups. The first one is that the use of categories in flirtatious sequence is a complete package. It provides ambiguity, yet enough meaning for understanding. The use of categories can be differentiated into 2. The first one is that the use of category can provide a context where even innocuous actions such as giving assurance, asking for update, etc., has enough potential to be understood as also conveying some kind of flirtatious sub-action or subtexts. The second one is that the mere mention of a specific category may call up various inferences which then enable a specific turn where the category is produced to be understood as doing flirting relevant action. The second finding is, since categories provide ambiguities, it carries the potential for the term, where it is produced, to be understood as doing several actions at the same time, solely because of its employment. In flirtatious sequence, one of those possible actions is blame attribution, specifically pushing the responsibility of initiating flirting to the other non-speaking participant. The third observation in our flirting data is that we observe an asymmetry between the male and female participants in terms of gender categories usage. The male participant puts the female participant in this and that gender categories, while the female hardly ever does so to the male participant. Now let's start with an instance of our first observation, where categories provide a context for some action in a turn, which appear as doing some kind of action on the surface, has enough potential to be understood as also conveying flirtatiousness or flirting intent. This specific extract is in your handout. It's not in the handout, sorry. It's labeled as extract 2. The focus is on line 9 to 10. The transcript on the left in the screen is in Indonesian. It's our regional language, and it's glossing, while the transcript on the right in its English idiomatic translation. The specific exchange occurs at the point where the two people who are recording the conversation are just about to leave. They are Beth, who speaks in line 2, and then Ron, who speaks later in line 11. In line 4, Beth indicates that they, meaning Beth and Ron, are returning in a while. In response, John says that it is alright even if Beth and Ron take a long time in line 5, providing some kind of assurance to Beth that Eva and he are going to be alright in Beth's absence. John then upgrades his assurance in line 9 to 10, saying that this is even pleasant, being a spare for someone else's wife. So not only that they are going to be alright even if Beth and Ron leave them for a long time, but it's even pleasant since the activity that he's doing is being characterized as a spare for someone, as a doing spare for someone else's wife. Now let's unpack what John may be doing through characterizing his current or upcoming activity in the absence of Beth and Ron as being a spare for someone else's wife. First and foremost, through the mention of someone else's wife, the MCD of married couple becomes relevant along with the normative relationship between a husband and a wife. Through inferences, different sorts of married couple category-bound activities and category-type predicates may also be invoked. A married couple may sit together at the park, talking about the recent general election, quarreling, talk about mortgage, intimate issues, or even be physically intimate. The potentials are actually endless. Then, secondly, John says someone else's wife. Consequently, it made relevant his position as a non-husband. Nyerep, being a spare, is not a productive word in Indonesian language. It is a verbal form of the noun serep or spare. The verb serep has limited collocations. It is either occurs as a modifier to kunci or key, or as a modifier to ban or tire. They are two household objects usually kept aside and only in use in the absence or the failure of the original one. So there's a metaphor there, and there's a potential to be understood in a humorous way. In line 9 to 10, through the use of someone else's wife, in line 10, John may invoke the MCD of married couple with him being the spare or his replacement husband. Then through inferences, different sorts of married couple category-bound activities may also be invoked. A married couple, as I mentioned before, may sit together at the park talking about the recent general election, quarreling, etc. The potentials are actually endless. However, intimacy is still one of the possibilities. Subsequently, Eva repeats the specific keyword from John's turn. Her repetition is special. She produces that specific keyword, nyerap, the verb of the turn, while smiling. Level intonation or no racing intonation, which indicates that her repetition is not a repair initiator. There is also a perturbation in her speech, which may indicate interpolated laugh particle. This repetition, done in that specific way, indicates Eva's understanding of the special work that the word nyerap do, whatever it is, and take it in a rather humorous way, suggested by her laughter, interpolated laugh particle. There is an ambiguity in her response as to how specifically she takes John's turn. Her response can be confusing. At the same time, it can also be seen as aligned with John's in terms of maintenance of serial ambiguity, which is a key in a flirtatious situation, flirtatious context. In line 11, Ron offers the two, Eva and John, to bring them some food, porridge, as Eva and John attends to this offer subsequently. Being spared for someone else's wife topic was then left hanging ambiguously in line 12. The use of category istri or wife in line 9 to 10 provides the context for the verb nyerap being a spare or replacement to be understood in intimate way. In this instance, we have seen how the use of category of istri, wife, in line 9 to 10 provides the context for the verb nyerap being a spare or replacement to be potentially understood in intimate way, among others, while maintaining ambiguity. Now we continue with the second way of using categories in flirtatious sequence. That is where the use of a category call out various inferences, which then in turn enables the turn, again ambiguously, to be understood as doing some kind of action relevant to flirting. We actually have instances in our data where categories are being employed in a turn potentially doing flirtatious action, but in the interest of time for today's presentation, I will show categories being used in a subsequent action, acknowledging that a flirting turn has just been produced by the other participant. This specific extract is labeled as extract 3. The focus is on line 52, where John says this is a deprived wife, while referring to Eva, the female participants. In line 46 to 47, Eva produces an ambiguous turn, which among different things can be understood as telling the slave condition to escort her home. Since it is produced in front of the only audience there, John, and a response to John's earlier prompt indicating that Eva's house is scary at night, Eva's telling can be understood as a conditional invitation to escort her home or to come over to her house at night. The condition is none other than being unseen, or we may say clandestinely. Then, as a response to this potential conditional invitation, John looks at the camera, smiles, and then says, "Viewers, this is a deprived wife," in line 50 and 52. The crux of John's turn in line 52 lies in the use of word, a category of jablay. To give you better understanding, let's go to the next slide where I explain what the word jablay means for Indonesian. For Indonesian, the word jablay contains nuances of meaning. The main meaning is that since the word is derived from abbreviation jarang, rarely, and diblay, caressed, it basically means someone who is rarely caressed or deprived of affection. Other than its abbreviated derived meaning, jablay also has a more sinister nuance. It also used to refer to slut or prostitute, female who goes out offering sexual service for fee or in exchange of money. Then there is this 2006 Indonesian drama comedy movie. Because of its success, it adds a face to the word jablay, and it brings jablay to the mainstream Indonesian culture. In the movie, In the movie soundtrack, Jabla is depicted as a tacky kampong singer who was abandoned by her husband. She sings from one small event to another in villages, dress up and act up in tacky and flirtatious way. This depiction adds some humor nuances to the word Jabla and makes it culturally more acceptable to be used in everyday conversation as opposed to the slut or prostitute meaning. Now let's return to the data. Here in line 52, John talks to the camera and introduces Eva as an istri yang jablay or a deprived wife or a lonely wife. In doing so, he categorizes Eva not as a jablay or a person who is deprived of affection, but a wife who is deprived of affection, which, even without prior tense, actually makes sense. Eva's husband is away for most of the time, so she is probably deprived of affection. But why does John have to do the categorization at this specific point in their interaction? My proposed explanation would be that John connects deprived wife with Eva's action in line 46-47. Inviting over a male to one's house clandestinely at night would be one kind of category-bound activity that a deprived wife would do. Not only because her husband is away for most of the time that Eva warrants to be referred as deprived wife, but also because her prior action in the sequence, inviting a male to clandestinely take her home at night, that she warrants to be referred as the deprived wife. That kind of action would be one kind of category-bound activity that a deprived wife would do. By seeing this kind of connection, we can see how line 52 can be understood, among others, as an acknowledgement of the prior alleged flirtatious action, Eva's flirtatious action in line 46-47. Now, let's move on to the next one, how categories are used for moral work, responsibility attribution, or borrowing Maria Wokes' 1984 term, blame allocation. Flirting action is one kind of designedly ambiguous action. Stocco, 2012. What makes Susan Spears, 2017. What makes flirting needs to be ambiguous is that the stake that one has to put when they charge with this intimacy negotiating action. One way to lessen the blame of flirting is to deny one's status as initiator or even a party who involved in the flirtatious sequence. Let us return to extract 3. Previously, I have mentioned what John may be doing in line 52. Among other things, it is an acknowledgement that Eva's prior 10, meaning line 46-47, is doing flirting. Other than that, through the use of category of jablay wife, John can also be understood as attributing Eva's flirtatiousness to her own category-bound activity as a jablay wife. Inviting over a male to one's house clandestinely at night would be one kind of category-bound activity that a deprived wife would do. In so doing, she may have taken away his role in co-constructing this flirtatiousness. While a closer look revealed Eva was actually responding to John's ambiguous turn, prompting her that it is scary at night at her house in line 41. Prior to line 41, Eva and John are talking about the location of Eva's house. This line 41, is the one that being responded by Eva, the one that enables her at least to do the alleged flirtatious action. Through inferences other than acknowledging Eva's potential flirtatious action, line 46-47, John may also deny his role in initiating the flirtatious sequence. This is the kind of multiple works that categories instrumentally do in our data. Then, lastly, we also observe an asymmetry between the male and female participant in terms of gender categories usage. The male participants participant puts the female participant in this and that gender categories, while the female hardly ever done so. Throughout the flirtatious sequences in the data, John, the male participant, consistently categorizes Eva as a female. Time after time, John calls or addresses Eva as a wife and Ibu or mother, while Eva hardly done so. Eva puts herself at the backdrop female categories, which consequently makes John's incumbency to the male category relevant. And she corroborates with John when he puts her in this and that female categories. However, she does not put John in some kind of male categories. Only one time Eva categorizes John, which is as a wartawan or male journalist, but that is not in the service of doing some kind of gender work. She does that simply to tease him on his busybody nature. In terms of categories, we can see though the flirting sequence are jointly constructed by Eva and John, they are doing it differently. John puts Eva in this and that gender categories, while Eva hardly ever done so. That's all our presentation today. Questions and comments are welcome.